Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Brooks Dearborn, and I'm an associate professor of photography here at UCF. So I want to welcome you guys to our final event of the semester for the School of Visual Art and Design, our Distinguished Artist Lecture Series. Our goal with this lecture series is to bring leading voices in contemporary art and design to speak to students at UCF about their work and their research. And before I introduce our speaker, Josh Wardle, I would like to thank the College of Graduate Studies and Dean Weishample, without which this event would not have been possible. And I also want to thank the Department of Computer Science, the Center for Humanities and Digital Research, and the College of Arts and Humanities and School of Visual Arts and Design for also helping to make this event possible. So I'm so excited to introduce Josh Wardle, technology speaker, artist, accidental entrepreneur, creator of the viral internet game Wordle. When Josh released Wordle in October 2021, it quickly became a viral sensation. In 3 months, Wordle went from 90 daily users to 10 million and was featured on Saturday Night Live, The Tonight Show starring Fallon, among many, many others. In 2022, Josh sold the game to the New York Times for a 7-figure sum and was named to Time Magazine's list of 100 most influential people of 2022. Born in South Wales, Josh earned a degree in media arts from the University of London and an MFA from the University of Oregon. And before creating Wordle, Josh worked as a product manager at Reddit, where he created 2 very popular collaborative games, Button and Place. Recently, Josh was also a software engineer at the Brooklyn Art Collective called Mischief. And while Josh was with Mischief, they produced a wide range of artworks and products ranging from browser plugins to sneakers, such as Lil Nas X's skate shoes, in addition to staging multiple art exhibitions. So please join me in welcoming Josh Wardle.
Cool. Thank you, Brooks. Can everyone hear me? No. Okay, no one can hear me. All right, let's try. What about? Oh, yeah. Woo! All right. Okay, cool. Give me 1 second. Oh, yeah. I tend to ramble, so I'm going to set a timer. So hopefully that keeps me on track. 1 second. All right, perfect. Cool. Thank you so much, Brooks. Thank you, everyone, for having me. It's great to be here. So I understand the thing that I did that most people want to hear about is Wordle, right? I made this game. A lot of people play it, and I love talking about Wordle. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about it. But I thought, because I was here at a university, I was actually going to go back and talk about some of the work I did in grad school when I met Brooks, actually. And what was so interesting to me in looking back at the work I did then was how influential it was on everything I've done since, in a way that I didn't really understand at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just exploring things, trying things. And when I look back now, I can see these clear lines. Oh, this stuff had a really, really big impact on me. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to talk a bit about that, and then I'll talk about Wordle. Before I started, the one thing I wanted to do is acknowledge, it feels really good to be invited to talk, to stand up here in front of all of you. And at the same time, there is also part of me that feels uncomfortable with the fact that that feels good, and I don't really know what to do with that. So I'm trying something new, and that new thing is I'm going to try reading a poem. This is the first time I've done this. So I didn't write the poem, if that's any, if that helps, and it's very short. But I'm going to see, maybe this will help. So here we go. It is called Deconstruction by Mary Ruefle. It says, I think the sirens in the Odyssey sang the Odyssey, for there is nothing more seductive, more terrible than the story of our own life, the one we do not want to hear and will do anything to listen to. Cool. So yeah, thank you for humoring me with that. We'll see maybe I'll just feel really pretentious for having done that. I don't know. All right, so yeah, I want to talk about some of the influences I had going into grad school, because these were like really big on me. So the first one was, oh yeah, this idea of conceptual art. So came about in the 60s, and it was a response to the idea of formalism, right? So if you think about something like a Jackson Pollock, there are two really important things about a Jackson Pollock painting. One is the way it looks, and the other is that it was done by Jackson Pollock. If you change either of those, you no longer have a Jackson Pollock. Conceptual artists were kind of interested in rejecting that notion, so they came up with this, the idea itself, even if it is not made visual, is as much of a work as art as any finished product. When the artist uses a conceptual form of art, it means that all the planning decisions are made beforehand and the execution is a perfunctory affair. The idea becomes a machine that makes the art. And this was very impactful to me. So this is John Baldessari piece. He actually paid a sign painter to like create these paintings. So he was like, his hand was not involved. And it really, to me, it's like, you know, there's something beautiful about these. They like really get to the root of art in a way that I find it interesting. It's like exploring these, what is the idea behind the art? This is another one of Solowit's wall drawings. And the way this worked is the actual artwork is the instructions that tell you how to do this work. And you take those instructions to your gallery and you draw the artwork on the wall, and then it's kind of site-specific, and it's a permanent installation until you paint over the wall. And so it kind of resists, he isn't involved in the drawing of this thing, your gallery assistants do it, and it kind of resists commodification in the sense that you can't, you know, sell the wall in your gallery. So this is an example, this is one of the certificates of one of his wall drawings explaining, you know, this is what you would buy, which is a little weird, right? This doesn't, I don't know, I think that the art world wants to commodify things, right? It wants, you know, Solowit was saying, I'll give you these instructions and you can do this wall drawing and that's the work, but actually here's the certificate proving what you bought and this is the thing that is valuable. And I think conceptual art was appealing to me for two reasons. One reason was that was how I thought I liked thinking about things. And the other thing was, it felt like a bit of a grift, if I'm honest. Like I could just say my artwork is thinking about things. That seems amazing. Like I'm in grad school, I'm having a great time. I like don't have to spend too much time on all my practice is something I'm doing all the time anyway. The other artwork, oh yeah, this one is very different. This is from a graffiti artist in London called Mobster. And so this is a series of photos he released. So this is a power substation somewhere in London. And he noticed there's a red wall and he graffitis on it the word red, right? So the text red on a red wall, comes back the next day, some more graffiti appears, comes back the next day, some city council worker has come and painted over the red wall with red paint. So he comes back the next day and paints, graffitis red with a stencil above it, comes back the next day, it's been painted over. This continues, slowly increasing. You can see where this is going. So red, we're getting to the limit. And then he puts red, question mark, like what is this person gonna do? Oh, it's disappeared. So Mobster comes back and says, pressure wash this, anything under it, paint red. And they come back and they've only painted it red. And then so he's like, what about this? Stays there, and now they've broken the rules. They've painted red above the red line. And so he says, you went above the line, and then red, it's like, where is this gonna end? Comes back, there's some serious work going on, and it's all gone. He repeats pressure wash, paint red, stays there for a few days, comes back, the whole thing's been painted red. And yeah, that's the end of the series. And like this, like when I was in college, this was super exciting to me. Like I like graffiti, there was something forbidden about it. And there was also something beautiful about it that I thought is that there were these two humans having a conversation through a system that wasn't designed for them to communicate. They weren't meant to be talking across a wall like someone working for the government and a graffiti artist. And that really resonated with me, and it really excited me in some ways. As I've got older, I just sympathize with the government worker, actually, like someone's making you come back every day and paint the wall red. That just seems like, yeah, not great. So yeah, so that leads into my MFA work. So I was, as Brooks mentioned, I went to grad school at the University of Oregon, and one of the, I remember this, we had to do an art show as a first year grad student, and I'd never really made art before, despite being in art school, and I got very obsessed with everything around the work of art except the art itself. So in a gallery context, I got really fascinated by the placards, the little things that appear next to a work of art that, tell you who the artist was, the title, when it was made, some of the materials. And I was like, what if I throw everything else out and that is the work of art? So this was the work that I showed. It was just the placard referring to itself on a wall in the gallery. You can see how poorly made it is. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, to show it. But so I was preoccupied with this idea of like, what is art, and like how we decide what is art and what isn't art. And this went on. I found in art school I was being asked to write artist statements a lot, justifying why I was doing the work I was doing. And it was awfully tiresome. And so what I did, and I felt, especially in an academic context, art had this language around it, which I kind of enjoyed, right? Like the work I've done with Wordle, clearly I love words. And there was this aspect to the art world, the academic art world, that was based around language. And I think that it is simultaneously both necessary and also, a bit problematic. Like there's something there that I think we've all read descriptions of artwork where you just have no idea what is being said. So this work was basically I just put a bunch of like arty sounding words, and then the idea would be you just like underline the ones that are relevant to you. You don't really have to think too much about the work that you're doing. This was. So combining the placards and that art language, I then started to build artwork, which was just, these were placards that you would display next to everyday objects that would somehow make them become art. So the idea was that you would buy this and you would put it next to a light switch that you had, and then suddenly you had this art object, right? So light switch forces the viewer to consider the innate dualism of the human condition. Initially, the work appears to only have two positions, either on or off. However, upon closer reading, it becomes evident that the piece alludes to the infinite nature of experience through the juxtaposition of light and dark. So this is like very playful and still exploring like what is it that makes something art and what is the role of language in making something art. So this continues. This isn't a work of mine. This is actually University of Oregon, big campus. This is a piece of art that the university owns that was on display. I'm sure there are examples around campus here. And being me, I got very obsessed with the placards that got displayed next to these artworks. Here's another one. And then it always felt like maybe the placards they didn't treat the art maybe with the respect it deserved. I don't know, I always felt this, I like the artwork, but the placard was kind of like bodged together. And so what I ended up doing, this is a piece of art that I bought in a thrift store, and then I installed it in the university. Like I just went into, this is in the library in the University of Oregon, I went, hung up a piece of art and put a placard next to it that looks like a regular placard. Again, kind of exploring this idea of like, everything but the art itself was interesting to me as a piece of art. I don't actually know if this artwork is still hanging. I'm going back to Eugene, Oregon for the first time in like 15 years this summer, so I'm going to go and check out. My hope is that maybe some of these artworks, I hung about 5 of them, these thrift store artworks, somehow just got accumulated into the University of Oregon collection, and now they're on permanent display. Oh yeah, while I was in grad school as well, I also had the opportunity to, there was a kind of human computing interaction lab, and they had a eye gaze vision laboratory. It's basically where you can control a computer through your gaze, where you're looking. So often it's used as an assistive device. We had access to it in an art context. And so this was the first time I had done a little bit of programming work, but this was the first time I was really exploring using computers to create artwork. And so what this artwork is, I'll play a video. It's a little hard to see, but the artwork is a statement about the artwork. And as the viewer, as you view this artwork, so it was displayed on an eye gaze tracking machine, any way you tried to look, the text would shift. So it was impossible to actually read. And through the act of reading, you would destroy the artwork and you would destroy the text. So in this version that I'm going to play here, you'll see the reader's gaze is rendered as a red dot. And you'll see as they look and try and read, they destroy the work. So yeah, this was really interesting to me. Again, like combining these ideas of like language, its relation to art, and then thinking about the way humans interact with technology and the way that might, like all of that might come together in some more interesting ways. And that leads to this piece. So this was like a piece that I showed at the University of Oregon called This Button. And I felt this was like me doing conceptual art. I felt so good about this. The concept was there was a button and a timer. The timer just counts up. And if you press the button, this physical button down here, the timer resets to 0. So I thought this was so succinct, and to me, like, the viewer was going to have a choice when they came and stood in front of this artwork. Were they going to press the button or not? And what they didn't know is how many people had come before them and chosen not to press the button. And that if there's 24 days on the timer, maybe you would think more about pressing the button and what you might be erasing by pressing it. So I showed this in a graduate critique where like grad students come and look at your work. And what happened is everybody just lined up and pressed the button without thinking about it at all. And so I was like, it was a failure in that regard. But this will come back as I get on to, after grad school, I ended up working at Reddit. Reddit is a social media website that's organized into communities where people come together to discuss their passions. I was actually there in 2011. This is how it looked. It was kind of described as dystopian Craigslist. It's kind of like pretty bad looking website. What it turns out is in Silicon Valley on April 1st, so April Fool's Day each year, tech companies like to do these pranks, creative things where they like show how creative they are. And in Silicon Valley, these were often, at that time, often take this form. So this was Google. They had just released voice detection. And so their April Fool's joke for that year was they were going to release smell detection. Obviously, they didn't make this. This is just, they made a like fancy video. And I was of the opinion, like, we have this opportunity. I have this art degree. Let's do something like really different. Let's try something really, really different. So I went back to that idea that I had with the button. And I basically ported it over to Reddit, and I said, there's a timer. This time the timer is counting down rather than up, and if you press the button, the timer resets back up to 60 seconds and continues to counting down. The critical thing here is that you may only press the button once, so that each person on the website Reddit can only press the button once. So this is what it looked like. There was a timer counting down. You could press it, it would reset, but you could never press it again. So the question in my mind was, how long will the collective internet decide to keep this button going? Like one person, once you press it, you can never press it again. Turns out the answer was 2 months. So for 2 months, every 60 seconds, a human somewhere chose to press the button. And there was this huge community effort and organization and collaboration to figure out how to make this thing work. And that was when Reddit, the company, really realized that April Fool's Day was this opportunity where we could lean more into like these artistic explorations and experiments. So the next year, I came up with a different idea, this one called Robin. So this one says, I say, humans make connections. They were getting artier. Sometimes these connections grow, sometimes they stay the same, and sometimes they collapse. And so what Robin was, it was a chat experience. So you would opt into the chat experience and you'd be put into a chat room with one other person. And you were given 3 options. You can see at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can abandon, you can vote to abandon, which just quits out of the current chat room and you can sign up again. You can vote to stay, in which case it will just be you and this other person chatting together forever, or you can vote to grow. And what happens when you vote to grow is we find 2 other people who made the same choice, and we mash you together, and now there are 4 of you in the room, and we repeat that process, growing, exponentially, doubling. And so what this work, in my mind, was meant to do was meant to encourage people to think about the consequences of growth, specifically related to online communities. Working in Silicon Valley, there's a really heavy emphasis on user growth and bringing in new users. But in my mind, there was a real cost to that, as you'll see. So in this case, this was 2 groups merging, and one of the groups was really into Lucas, and they had to convince the other group that they were merging together with that they should also be really into Lucas. So these 2 communities had to figure out how to interact. And then it often, when they grew to a specific size, it just devolved into spam. Like trying to be in a chat room with 1,000 other people turns out is a miserable experience. And so Robin was really interesting in that some people really enjoyed it. They felt it evoked an earlier period of the internet where things were a bit more innocent and we didn't really know what we were doing. And at the same time, people were like, there is a limit at which the number of people we want to have interacting together, and it tended to be the sweet spot, it was about like 36, 50 people. Once you got above that, it was no longer fun, and it actually became toxic and actively harmful. And I think for a website like Reddit, who's in the business of like bringing a bunch of people together, these were really, really interesting lessons to learn. The next year, and this is probably the one that was the most famous that I did at Reddit. This was called Place. So there is an empty canvas. You may place a tile upon it, but you must wait to place another. Individually, you can create something. Together, you can create something more. So the way Place worked is there was a blank canvas, and you could place a tile on the canvas, which was like a pixel. But you could only place 1 pixel every 5 minutes. And so what that meant, if you wanted to draw anything as an individual, it was going to take you a really, really long time. But if you could find 100 other people who wanted to draw the same thing as you, you could probably together figure out how to draw something. But it's incredibly risky, right? Like I'm asking the anonymous internet effectively to draw something on a blank canvas. There is an intense risk here, but actually everything tended to work out really well with Place. So this was one of the first instances of collaboration in Place. This is sped up slightly. But this is the bottom right-hand corner of the canvas. It was known as the blue corner, because all you had to do to participate in the blue corner of the canvas was just paint blue. So it described itself. It was very obvious how you should participate and how you could collaborate with other people. So this was, and this lasted for the project ran for 3 days. The blue corner remained the entire time. Let's see what else we have. Oh yeah, this occurred on like day 1. You'll see a picture start to emerge at the top of the screen. What you're seeing is thousands of people come together to draw the Mona Lisa together, 1 pixel at a time, with only individuals placing a pixel every 5 minutes. So they're having to coordinate and figure out who's doing what, who's painting what where. And this was like an outcome. I predicted things like the blue corner, things that were fairly straightforward, but something like, the Mona Lisa being drawn, I did not predict at all. Oh. I'm going to wait and see. I can't skip through this video, unfortunately. It's a bit longer than I expected. Oh, there we go. And so this is a time lapse of the entire canvas, 3 days, sped up into about 10 seconds. So this is, you see the blue corner down at the bottom right. Here's the Mona Lisa emerging. And it's kind of like an anarchic, people say it's like the internet threw up on itself kind of thing. But it was this, I think for Reddit, the biggest takeaway was what didn't emerge on the canvas. Like you would think a project like this, a website like Reddit, you would probably get some heinous stuff. And like I said, this felt like a really big risk with the project. But what it actually turned out is that it's really, really hard. Most people want to collaborate to do positive things. To get a large group of people to work together to do a really negative thing was actually quite hard. And there would always be more people that wanted to, if you tried to draw something heinous, there would be a bunch of people just drawing over the top of whatever you would do. So nothing like that could ever take hold. And this has been really successful. Reddit's redone place like 3 times. I think in the most recent one, like 10 million people participated. Oh yeah, so that brings me on to Mischief. So Mischief is an art collective based in Brooklyn, known for a bunch of things. Big Red Boot here is probably one of the most famous things they did recently. It's very, very hard to describe Mischief, so I'm going to use Mischief's own words. Mischief is an art collective that engages art, fashion, tech, and capitalism. The collective subverts mass popular culture and corporate operations as tools for critique and intervention. Mischief as a practice and as an entity manifests the ambition for creative work, a creative entity to wield real tangible power in culture on the world stage as measured against the cultural power held by world-straddling companies, celebrities, and media entities. What I want to, like Mischief has done incredible work, I highly recommend, and it's very varied. I'm going to show you 2 works that they did that kind of really fit with the work that I've done previously. So one here, this is called the Museum of Forgeries. We purchased this Andy Warhol illustration for 20 grand. We copied it, we forged it 999 times. We shuffled all of those together, so there was one real version of the illustration and 999 exact replicas, and then we sold them for $250 each. And so this work kind of defies, we didn't destroy anything through doing this, and we created value, some will say, but kind of going back to that Le Sol Wit thing, the like desire for the art world to commodify and be commodified. I thought this was a really interesting exploration of that. The other project I want to highlight, which kind of ties into place, the canvas, is Key for All. So the way Key for All worked is you would pay, I think it was $20, you buy a key fob to a car. And I think we sold 5,000 keys, and all the key fobs unlocked the same car. And the way you found out where the car was is that you would call a hotline, and it would tell you some coordinates. It was a GPS tracker. And so you could go and just pick up the car if you had the key, but there are 5,000 other people, or 4,199, that have the same key. So this was the car. It was a PT Cruiser. Started out in New York, and then I think it slowly made its way west. It was kind of like a tragedy of the commons situation where it got defaced, spray painted, and it ended up abandoned in Truckee, California. So it made it all the way across, totally burnt out in the end. It probably lasted a little over a month, I think, and you can now see it. Mischief has a show in LA where the car is on display. And I thought this was a really interesting piece. This was kind of like place, but like in the physical world. And it succeeded in a way which, I never would have imagined possible. Cool. So that is kind of all the art stuff I've done. And then I want to get on to Wordle. Wordle is really different from all that stuff I just showed you previously. Wordle's clearly a game. The point that I came up with it, I had a career in Silicon Valley, and I learned a lot of things that you were meant to do in Silicon Valley around games and growth and engagement. And I was interested in doing like the opposite of all those things. So what I'm going to walk you through is like a bunch of decisions that I made with Wordle that were the opposite of what you were meant to do, but that bizarrely, I think, led to its success. So for those who don't know, Wordle is a daily word guessing game. You're trying to guess a 5-letter word. You enter a guess, it must be a real word. In this case, we are told that the S is present in the word, but not in the first spot, and the O, U, P, and Y are not in the answer. So you make another guess. And now you discover that A is in the second spot. You learn something more about the S, something more about the E. You make another guess. Cool, so you know all the letters. There's only one thing that it can be. That is Wordle. So here's one thing that I did that you're not meant to do, I think, as I made a word game. When you think about mobile games and like viral games, I think word games are very far from anyone's thought. Like you think about, you know, Candy Crush or like games like that. I think word games have been around for ages, and I think people just assumed that it was impossible for a word game to be a hit in the way that Wordle was. And that is striking to me because I think part of Wordle's success, as I see it, is going back to all my fascination with language, is that I think humans are creatures of language, and language is a part of everything we do. Like all of our experience basically happen via language. And what that means for a game like Wordle is that I don't have to teach you about words. When you come and play Wordle, you are bringing all your experience of language that you've accrued over your life to the game, and that makes the game. I don't have to teach you what you already know about words. So that feels really powerful to me, and something that was kind of being overlooked by conventional game developers. This was the game that Wordle was based on. It was called Mastermind, where you're trying to guess this colored pattern here. What's different here from Wordle is this colored pattern, the individual pieces have no relation to one another, right? You can't apply what you know about this one being here to this one being here. It's random. So you have to use pure logic. Whereas with Wordle, you can come to it with the fact that you know, for instance, that the word is very unlikely to begin with an X, because it's very uncommon for a 5-letter word to begin with an X. So what I did was, this was in like 2013, I took the idea of this game and I was like, what if I put words into this? I love words, let me put them into this game. And this was a prototype this was the very first prototype I made. It looks really bad, but this was the base game. You are guessing 5-letter words and it's giving you feedback. And so this was over 10 years ago I made this. And two big differences with this game and the game that ended up going viral. One of them is that as soon as you are done playing this game, it just went and got another word for you to solve. And so you would just play it nonstop. And Wordle, as it exists today, is a daily game. You can only play once a day, which I think is really important. The other thing is that the way this game worked is when it was selecting the word that you were going to guess, it would just choose one at random, and that was going to be the word you're guessing, which seems like, what's the problem with that? Well, this is the problem with that. These are all valid 5-letter words in the English language, and I don't know what any of them mean. And it was really clear to me, this was a problem with that game. Like, you would be playing it, and then you were like, I don't know, like you couldn't bring what you knew about language to the game because it didn't feel consistent with what you knew. It was like you were guessing the colored patterns again. The letters didn't have any relationship to one another. So there are about 13,000 5-letter words in the English language. So I had this challenge. I had to figure out how to get from 13,000 5-letter words down to 5-letter words that someone could reasonably know. And like reasonably know is like very loaded, like who knows what, is all up for debate. My approach for doing that was kind of weird, is I made another game to do it. It's barely a game. The way it worked is it would show you one of those 13,000 5-letter words and then ask you if you knew it, you didn't know it, or you kind of maybe thought you knew it. And my partner, she just sat there and categorized all 13,000 5-letter words. And what that resulted in is there are actually about 2,500 words that you could reasonably understand. And those were the words that would go on to become the solutions that you were guessing in Wordle. So you knew every time you played Wordle, you would know what the answer is. You never have a moment where you're guessing a word that you're like, I've never heard of this before. Or ideally, that should be the case. So yeah, this all happened, and then I put the game down, and I went and did. I was working at Reddit at this period. I did those projects that I showed you, and then it was actually during the pandemic. My partner and we were playing a lot of the New York Times crossword. So they have this is the the very famous crossword that follows like the daily game model. So there's one game each day, and she was also playing a lot of Spelling Bee, which is another New York Times game. Similar model. I really dislike Spelling Bee. She loves it. And I was like, I wanted to make a game for her that she would enjoy in the way she enjoyed Spelling Bee. And I was like, what about that game that I was working on 6 years ago that you did the classifying for and that I put down? So I took from New York Times crossword and Spelling Bee, I added that restriction that you could only play once a day. And that did a lot for the game, actually. And I think the biggest thing here, biggest change that this made, like normal with mobile games, you try and capture as much of the player's attention as possible. You want the person coming back, checking in. Wordle resists that. It's like, you're going to play for max 5 minutes, and then I don't want to hear from you again. And I could do that because my goal in making the game, I was making it for someone I loved. I didn't want to suck up all their time, right? And I think people responded to that in a really positive way. And I think also another thing that kind of emerged by accident from this is everybody was playing the same word every day. So it meant that you can now talk to other people about your experience playing the game, where if you were just playing endlessly, you didn't know that you were solving the same word as somebody else. So in the intervening 6 years, I got a little better at computer stuff. This was like the first version of Wordle that was like pretty close to what the version that became famous that I ended up selling. I plugged in the word list filtering that we did, and you can only play once a day. And this leads me, this is a website. The first prototype that I showed you, it was an Android app, because in 2013, everyone was like, apps of the future, you need to be making an app. By this point, I'd become a web developer, and I was like, I actually quite like websites. I like the fact that I don't need to go to an app store and download something. I just want to build this as a website so I can send it, and like everyone has a web browser, it will just work. And that is something that you're definitely not meant to do. You're meant to make people install an app so you can collect user data about them, you can send them push notifications, you can do microtransactions, all these things that are just deeply uninteresting to me. And I didn't want to do because I was making the game for someone I loved, right? I didn't want to do all this heinous stuff. And the byproduct of this, I think, was that the game was really shareable. You could send it to anyone, and they could instantly start playing. You didn't have to explain, oh, yeah, it's on the App Store. Here's how you download it. The other thing that I did that you're not meant to do was Wordle existed on a really, really bad URL. So my website is powerlanguage.co.uk, so not even .com, /Wordle, which is just like, no one can remember that. And I would have thought, prior to launching Wordle, that mattered way more. Like a vanity URL, they would call it, would really matter. But it turned out, in this case, it didn't at all. I think browser autocomplete did a lot of lifting. You could just type in Word and it would autocomplete, and you're like, all right, I don't have to remember this power language nonsense. Yeah, and so at that point, this was probably, I don't know, in January 2011, I think. Wait, no, 2021. This was pretty much the game, and my partner and I were playing it every day and really enjoying ourselves, and it was just us, and everything was good. And this is pretty much the version that everyone else ended up playing. So for reasons that I don't know, I'd shared it with some family members, they enjoyed it, and I shared it with people, and there was a point, I think Brooks mentioned, there were like 90 people playing a day, and I was pretty sure I hadn't shared it with 90 people, and I didn't really know. And then it kept on growing and growing, and then I had like Google Analytics installed, so I could see where people were playing, and this was the population of New Zealand is 5 million, and like the population of the United States is 330 or something million. So like New Zealand massively over-indexing on the number of players playing there. And at this point in time, actually, when you completed Wordle, you just had to say, I completed the Wordle in 3. Like, you just had to text someone. And there was a player called Elizabeth S., who I don't actually know. She came up with this idea on Twitter of sharing her Wordle score using the emoji keyboard, using these colored symbols. And people started doing this a bunch on Twitter. So I built this into the game, and this became the share grids, which became the game became famous for this share grids because it was a way of sharing the results of the game without spoiling the results for other people. It was also interesting, you'll notice, this is another thing the game did. The game didn't promote itself. Nowhere here is there a link to play the game. And this was very deliberate by me. I really, it felt complicated. If you completed a game of Wordle and the game said, great, now share, and then the share was like, hey, come and play Wordle, that felt complicated to me in a way that, what was my goal there? Was my goal really aligned with the player's goal? I wanted them to be shilling for Wordle, basically. That didn't feel good, so it felt easier for me just to leave off the link. If people want to figure it out, they can do it. Again, I'm making this for someone I love. I'm not really thinking about the best strategies for growth. And I think this had a byproduct in, I think people quite like that it's not really trying to sell itself to you. And also there's something kind of mysterious about this, right? You see all these people sharing this grid, you're like, what is that? I need to figure out how to be part of this this club. So a bunch of, and this is in December, bunch of celebs start sharing Wordle, and it's going absolutely bonkers on Twitter. This was, a bunch of parody, this, people would paint. So this was their Wordle result, and then they try and paint what they thought it represented. I really like that. This was someone, she cross-stitched her Wordle results every day. This was awesome. Oh yeah, the New York Times, so this was before I'd sold it to them, they wrote an article about how I made the game for my partner. And we're both quite private people, so this was a little odd to have our relationship put front and center like this. But when this article got written, suddenly things really took off in terms of the number of people playing. Yeah, we got, it was on a bunch of talk shows. Everyone was talking about Wordle. Yeah, Monica Lewinsky, she loves Wordle. And this was, I had experienced going viral. The stuff I'd done at Reddit, things I've been exposed to at Mischief had always been, things have gone viral, but there'd always been a company between me and the attention. And this was the first time I didn't have that. And it was deeply uncomfortable. I did not like it at all. And that was something that I've really wrestled with back then, and I still don't quite know how to feel about today. A bunch of knockoffs started appearing. So this is Dawdle. This is, you're doing 2 Wordles at once, and there's Quordle, you're doing 4. Then Octordle, there's Hexadeca Wordle or something where you're doing 1,000 or 1024 at once. There's Wordle in every language. There's Hurdle, where you're trying to listen to a song. There's Worldle, where you're guessing a country, territory. So at this point, it's kind of transcended the game, and it's become a format. Guessing things, turns out, is really popular. I don't know, and it opened up this avenue of games. This is my favorite, Tradle. You have to guess a country based on the exports of the country. I feel that is pretty niche. There are a bunch of really interesting stories that came out. This was Wordle saves woman from naked man holding his, so some guy broke in some woman's, and the daughter knew to alert the police because the mother hadn't shared her Wordle score. So I actually spoke to the daughter. It was the woman's okay, everything worked out. It was an incredible story. I come from a small town in Wales. This is how their newspaper, so farmer's son is me. My dad is a farmer. Farmer's son Wordle, game saves hostage gram. This is very UK media. There are all these positive tales as well, right? I lost my mum to QAnon. Wordle is bringing her back. The Wordle could become the way that you could talk to other people. And I got this really touching email, which I'm going to read. So someone emailed me and says, I'm a Wordler in Nebraska. Both my parents play now. We don't have a lot in common, even though we love each other a lot. I'm gay, they're conservative Christians. Wordle has given us a way to come together every day. My mother loves that regular contact with me, and it's something that I enjoy too, that distracts me from all the difficult differences between us. And this was really powerful to me, right? Like this Wordle having this impact for people to communicate, and really made me think about a lot of the stuff that I'd done at Reddit, and the power of the internet. Like, the internet should really be helping us to communicate with one another, but something's gone wrong somewhere along the way, and it's having the opposite effect. And so it felt, even though I hadn't set out to do it, this has been my biggest takeaway from my experience at Reddit. So this is, my family has a group chat, and Wordle ended up taking over the group chat, so they had to split out, and they now have just a Wordle group chat where you share your scores and you say what you think the Wordle represents. And I've heard that this is very common, that people have a family group chat, and sometimes it is hard to talk in that family group chat, or it is hard to tell your family that you love them every day, because saying I love you is kind of this big, heavy thing, and it's like, why are you saying you love me right now? Like, where do you want to go with this? Whereas sharing your Wordle score is like this incredibly light thing, and if they want to share their score back with you, they can. If they want to ask how your day is doing, they can, but there's no stakes to it, and it became this really lightweight way, basically, I felt, for people to check in and just say, hey, I love you, I'm thinking about you. And that's been the most powerful part of this experience. A number of people that have told me that it had this impact on them and their families. So I end up selling the game to the New York Times, which seems a bit odd, right? Like, Wordle's going really well, it's doing really successful, but there are a couple of things that really come up with me. So I didn't want to run a games business. Like, I'm interested in making art, making interesting games and things that explore the way people interact. Thinking about running a business, you have to think about a lot of stuff that's just deeply uninteresting and not fun in my mind. So it was kind of clear that I didn't want to do that. And so my solution there was, I was just going to give the game away for free, not run ads. It wasn't costing me much to run it, and I would be fine with that. But yeah, because I didn't monetize the game. Again, I was making it for someone I loved. I didn't want to put ads on it. The trouble that came up is it turns out there were a bunch of people who didn't have any such qualms. So they would basically copy the game and put it in the App Store and put ads on it. And it got into a really, really complicated situation for me, right? Like, I had said, I don't want to make any money for this game. There are these people over here who've taken the game and are making money from it. There was money that I said I didn't want to make, yet something about that felt deeply wrong to me, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't want to be paying a lawyer to issue cease and desist, like all that stuff. I was just like, the sale to the New York Times is a way just to be like really clean. It's your problem now. This isn't what I wanted. I'm out, basically. And that was it. Yeah, that was how things ended with Wordle. And I think as I was putting together this talk, and like, what I wanted to start on the work that I'd done in grad school is, I can see, and I think there's obviously biases here, right? When looking back, I can tell a story that like, oh, the stuff I did earlier led to Wordle. And I think part of that is me, I'm trying to tell a compelling story, but also I think part of it is true. And I didn't know that those explorations and exploring language and thinking about the way people were interacting would lead to something like Wordle, but I feel like it did in some ways. And going forward, that is how I'm going to continue. I think it's exploring the things that are interesting to me. It's not trying to make another Wordle. It's doing what I was doing before, which led to Wordle, which is just like, I like language, I like thinking about people and seeing what emerges from there. So cool. Thank you all very much.
So first, thank you very much. So as an artist, I guess I just I want to know, how do you make the minute decisions? Like, because you're making something very big, how did you choose the specific font for Wordle, the shade of green when you get a letter right? Like, how do you pick those small things?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And my answer is going to be maybe frustrating in that it was only through doing a lot of the things that I felt I had the confidence where I could be like, this feels right, basically. Like the first version of Wordle I showed you, the really terrible Android-looking one, like that was the extent of my visual design skills back then, and it was only through working and a lot of practice, basically, that I became confident in my own abilities, and I was like, I wasn't building for anyone else but myself, and so if it felt good to me, that was how it should be. So it wasn't calculated and thinking what would be the most appealing to people. It was like about having confidence in my own work and being like, oh, this feels good to me. I'm going to stick with that.
Okay, well, thank you.
Since you like just stuff that's like colorful and interactive, do you like Rubik's Cubes?
So no, not at all. In fact, do you like Rubik's Cubes? Oh, so I feel like Rubik's Cubes, I'm not a very spatial person, so I really struggle like mental model, and I also feel like with Rubik's Cubes, maybe you can be shown, there is a way to solve a Rubik's Cube that you can be taught, and then I can see that once you learn that, they become really enjoyable. I never got to the learning part, so they're just utterly confusing and frustrating to me, I'm afraid. Yeah, I take it you like Rubik's Cubes. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
When you started to receive all of the acknowledgement and the fame from from the games, did you feel a lot of pressure from all of the recognition you were getting, or was it a mix of emotions?
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. It was really intense. I don't handle stress very well. I found it very stressful. It's like a lot of attention on me, and I actually turned down most of the stuff I was invited to take part in, just because it felt, I don't know, it wasn't, Wordle had emerged from this very personal place, and I wanted, if I had set out to make a hit game, I probably would have been like, yes, like put me on the TV or whatever, but because I hadn't, it felt very natural just to be like, no, actually this is kind of this personal thing that I made for my partner. I love that everyone loves it, but that isn't part of the story that's important to me, sort of thing. And I think my natural tendency is to pull away from that stuff anyway, so yeah. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your amazing presentation.
Thank you.
And your amazing idea. Actually, I have many questions, but the main one is, what do you call yourself? Are you artist, are you programmer, or game designer? And if so, what make you to call you that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I just like tack new words on. So I say like I'm an artist, now I'm a software engineer, a product manager, that was what I did. So now I guess I'm a game designer. I think that, again, this has only come over time and feeling confident about, like, I have a really good sense of what I want to be doing and creating, and how I refer to myself isn't as important to me now. I think there was a period of my life when it would have been, like, I was like, yes, I want to call myself an artist, but I think now I just feel confident in the work I've done, where, I can say, in a context like this, I might say I'm an artist, but in a Silicon Valley context, I might not, because people will be like, well, that's a bit weird. I'm comfortable changing, and it doesn't have, it's not as important to me as it once would have been.
All right, so first thing is like I'm very impressed with, like, say, the idea, let's say, old story behind Wordle because, I mean, it does change the way I see a successful programs and sort of software solutions, because I think it doesn't need to be like blockbuster, or it doesn't require like billions of dollars, but it's part of that's a very practical, let's say practical reasons and such. So I'm really impressed with that, and I would take that as one of my that's my symbol, or like the mission of my goal, because let's say I'm also learning as a programmer as well. So I think this is like a one mistake, yes, because like Wordle is a thing, but I've ever thought that Wordle can be also played other like platform, not just from web browser, because I've seen like there's a version of Wordle that can be played on a calculator, like a TI.
Yeah.
So like how do you feel about that, and like do you ever think that the day of the TIA for Wordle thing was there?
Yeah, so I think two things coming up for me there. Like, one is, I think you're right. Previously, when people thought about what you needed for making like a hit tech product or a game, they wouldn't think of something as small as Wordle. Wordle was tiny. It was inexpensive to run. It was like, didn't do all that. You couldn't log into Wordle. It did all these things very differently. And I think people responded positively to that difference. Like, it was just the thing. It wasn't trying to do all this other stuff. It was just a thing. Just get you to the thing as fast as possible. I love and like, to the point about the calculator, I think that I love all of that stuff. Like the fact that Wordle is a simple enough format that people want to express it on all these different mediums. I think that's amazing. And I think it is, I'm like, when I've seen it put on a bunch of different devices, and it always warms my heart. Yeah.
How are you doing? Oh, sorry. This isn't a question. This is an observation of mine.
Yep.
And what I noticed in your earlier slides, where you were showing a photo where you said that the gentleman, he did the graffiti on the wall, and it's kind of like this, kind of like tug of war. It's like, take the wall, we're going to come back and tag it over. But I noticed what you did when you mentioned something about graffiti, how it's like a language that's kind of like ostracized in a space where it's not welcome, but it kind of intersects or bridges that gap to create, dialogue. What I noticed what you did, which was very innovative and was like genius with the Wordle, was like, here it is, you're bridging that gap between familiar people who don't necessarily interact with each other. And you talked about you used the gentleman from the Midwest, from his parents, and that he was able to actually have have a dialogue with his parents, and kind of go over that hurdle of his identity. So that was just one of my observations where I see where you kind of like took the inspiration of the graffiti and you created this platform from that, not just like with the language, but also like the aesthetics of the art,
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, that was genius.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that is a big part of like the work that I did at Reddit as well, right? Like I mentioned this in the talk, like somehow the internet and humans communicating on the internet has got fraught in a way that is both simultaneously very understandable, but also very disappointing. And that I don't think tech companies in Silicon Valley, they've created this problem, but they're not really actively trying to solve it. It's against their interests, and trying to demonstrate that the internet can be anything we want it to be, and it's on us to like create these experiences and show these there can be these really positive interactions that take place through different forms of human interaction, basically.
This is a bit of a multi-layered question.
Okay, go for it.
But it revolves around the same topic, which is relationship with the New York Times, because I kind of noticed it being a recurring theme through the creation of Wordle, whether it was the word games that your partner played, and where they wrote the story about you, about the love story, and then ultimately you ended up selling it to them. So the first kind of layer is what have your thoughts been about the role that the New York Times kind of played throughout the creation of Wordle, and then with the specific New York Times story in general, like you mentioned how, Wordle is almost a form of saying like, I'm thinking of you, I love you, that type of thing. You kind of feel like that you sharing your story about how Wordle, became a thing in the first place kind of led to that being, kind of catapulting Wordle even more into the stratosphere in the first place with that, thought in line of how it was created.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the New York Times definitely had an impact on the creation. Like I said, word games and playing once a day were two really things that I took direct inspiration from them. Like we were playing word games together. Folks don't play crosswords. I highly recommend crosswords. Playing a crossword with somebody else, someone that you love, is like an amazing experience because you get access to a part, like there will be things that they can understand in a crossword that you can never understand, and vice versa, and you get to see the person in another way, and that I've found to be an incredible experience. So they had a very large impact, and so I could have sold Wordle to a number of people. I could have sold Wordle to Zynga or those kind of games companies. Could have made way more money probably doing something like that, but it was clear to me that I wanted it. The New York Times was kind of where it felt it fit to me at that moment in time. In terms of the other part of the question, so about the love story aspect, I think most people playing Wordle probably didn't know that I'd made it for my partner, and those who did care to Google it, they could find it. And I think it's not a soulless corporation pumped out this thing that everyone's playing, right? It came from a place of love, and I think that feels, really good. People need those things. They want those things. They want to believe those stories are true, and in this case, it was true. So I feel really good about owning that. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. One thing I've noticed is some noise on internet communities. There's a drastic change from internet communities before pandemic and then during and then after. And Wordle sort of has this unique opportunity of being made before and then re-emerging during lockdown. Have you sort of noticed these trends in the internet communities changing and sort of becoming faster in your personal projects moving forward? And sort of how are you going to navigate the new ways communities are coming together and falling apart?
That's a really interesting question. I think it is something that I have heard. I've heard people say what you've said. I think I'm yet to experience it in the communities I'm a part of. So I haven't had the tangible experience of this is what how things have shifted. But I've heard it mentioned multiple times. So it's I don't have a great answer for you, I'm afraid, but thank you.
Hi, I was just curious because you mentioned your influences are conceptual artists, and you said that the idea itself is the work of art in relation to that. So when you were creating those games for Reddit and then with Wordle, do you find that the creation of those games is the art itself, or is it the sharing of it and the culture that comes through it, or both, or what's important?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the way I relate the conceptual art piece to the work I did at Reddit and Wordle to some extent, and I didn't do a good job of actually I don't think I mentioned this in the talk, but what it led me to do was I would try and remove as much as possible from the project until only the idea remained. With creative endeavors, especially when you're working with other people, but also when you're on your own, it is easy to add things. It's wouldn't it be nice if this was here, or what if we did this? And the part of conceptual art I took was the idea is the important part. So how much can we remove so just the idea is present? Obviously, I'm not just saying, hey, I've got this cool idea. I want to build the thing and show you it, but I'm trying to do as little as possible on top of the idea. Does that kind of make sense? So there's like, with Wordle, there's all this other stuff that could have happened around it, but I was like, no, I just want it to be the game, and that's all it is. And it's very limited in some ways, but I think people really responded to that.
Thank you for coming and talking to us.
Of course.
One of the things that struck me is you did this as a private endeavor. You seemed like a private person. You were a little uncomfortable with celebrity, and yet your name, Wardle, is like a play on words of Wordle.
Yeah.
And so has that given you a bit of more celebrity status than you had anticipated, and how are you handling that?
Yeah, really good question. So, yeah, anyone who's ever worked on a creative project, specifically on a computer, there is a moment where you need to name the thing that you're working on. You've got like a folder and you've got to give it a name. And I was only reminded of this recently. So Wordle was like the first thing I grabbed. You know, it was a pun on my last name. And had I thought more about it, I wouldn't have called it Wordle. But I think there was obviously this, like you mentioned, there's been this byproduct where people recognize me based on my name in a way that is being good in some ways. Like it's like people can say, oh, I like your game, and like I like that, but it does feel quite narcissistic. Like the people are like, oh, you named the game after yourself or something, which had not been my intention. But I remembered I was going through some old files for this presentation, and I found the game was meant to be called, this is not a joke, this is 100% real, Wordle was going to be called Mr. Bug's Wordy Nugs. That was for real going to be the name. And then I was like, I can't do that. I've got to come up. I have a mock-up where it's called Mr. Bug's Wordy Nugs. I mean, I probably would not have been successful had that been the name. So.